So by now, I'm sure you've heard that Italy is expected to have a new conservative prime minister, Giorgia Meloni, from the Brothers of Italy party. The way it works, she's won 26% of the vote for her party, and another right-wing coalition has 44% of the vote, so she's expected to be the prime minister. Now, Italy, like Europe in general, is having these economic problems, especially hugely high energy prices, and our press is immediately saying, well, that's because of Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And Putin's invasion of Ukraine was wrong. Putin's a bad guy. We shouldn't make excuses for him or for what he's doing. But the problem is this green energy push has put Europe in Putin's power. There's Putin in the driver's seat, as Trump warned it would do to the UN in 2018, and the Germans laughed at him. Here's just a clip of Trump in 2018.
Reliance on a single foreign supplier can leave a nation vulnerable to extortion and intimidation. That is why we congratulate European states such as Poland for leading the construction of a Baltic pipeline so that nations are not dependent on Russia to meet their energy needs. Germany will become totally dependent on Russian energy if it does not immediately change course.
The Germans snickered when he said that. We didn't include that in the clip, but they were snickering to one another. And notice that the countries that he praised, Poland, these are the conservative countries that are pushing back against the EU, that won't take immigrants, won't have immigrants sweeping in, pushing back. Hungary is pushing back against their, trying to bring this transgender ideology and really child molestation into their schools, and the EU is trying to punish them for that. So here is Giorgia Meloni, and she's speaking obviously Italian, and I'll just read I'll read the translation in case you're not watching. This is about what we're doing here today. Why is the family an enemy? Why is the family so frightening? There is a single answer to all these questions. Because it defines us, because it is our identity, because everything that defines us is now an enemy. For those who would like us to no longer have an identity and to simply be perfect consumer slaves. And so they attack national identity, they attack religious identity, they attack gender identity, they attack family identity. I can't define myself as Italian, Christian, woman, mother, no. I must be citizen X, gender X, parent 1, parent 2. I must be a number. Because when I am only a number, when I no longer have an identity or roots, then I will be the perfect slave at the mercy of financial speculators. The perfect consumer. It's a really powerful idea, that we're not just ourselves. We are defined by our cohort. We're defined by our families. We're defined by our culture. We're defined by our religion. And they're trying to sweep all of that away. And God, country, and family are her slogans, right? Now, here's the reaction of America's news networks. And by the way, this is Italy's first female prime minister. So if she were a leftist, what they would be talking about. This is their first female prime minister. If you listen really closely, these are all the networks reporting on this, you might notice a slight similarity in the way her election is being reported.
Voters in Italy tomorrow appear poised to make a hard right turn. The woman expected to become prime minister leads a party with roots in neo-fascism.
The hallmarks of Italian fascism, like this motto: God, fatherland, and family.
A far-right political party whose roots go back to post-World War II neo-fascists.
Far-right political party whose roots go back to post-World War II neo-fascists.
Roots in Italy's post-war fascist movement.
Roots in Italy's 20th century neo-fascist movement.
It's not like, they just pass one script around. It's like those three weird women in the Greek myths who have one eye and they pass it around. That's our networks, our news networks. They have just one eye in which they see everything from a left-wing perspective and they pass it around. CNN has the former liberal prime minister of Italy, Matteo Renzi, on. And this is an amazing clip. This is actually an amazing clip because imagine this happening in America. You actually can't. So here's a liberal. He opposes her. And they ask him if she's a fascist, and this is what he says.
Personally, frankly speaking, I was against Giorgia Meloni. So I'm not the best friend, and we grew up together in politics, but we are, and will be rival always. At the same time, I think that is not a danger for Italian democracy. She's my rival. I'm rival. We will continue to fight each other. But the ideas are now there is a risk of fascism in Italy is absolutely a fake news.
Fake news, yeah. So here's a guy who says, I oppose her. I'm against everything she's for. She's a conservative. I'm a liberal. She's not a fascist. The Wall Street Journal, in their editorial page, says Miss Meloni is a career politician. She's been vocal in defending Parliament's prerogatives against encroachments by the executive branch, which is the opposite of fascism, obviously. She owes her victory, at least in part, to opposing the government's management of the COVID-19 pandemic, which included draconian lockdowns, the most authoritarian policy Italians experienced in generations since World War II. So she is not a fascist. She is a member of the NAF party, not a fascist, elected by people who were reacting to the oppression of experts, right, which went all throughout Europe and the United States and many states in the United States. Now, obviously, you may recognize the way she's being treated as the same way we are being treated here, right? I mean, those of us who believe in freedom, who believe in individual freedom, who believe in religious freedom, who believe that people should be able to train their own children in matters of sexuality and morality, that teachers who haven't really taught our children how to read very well should not be going in there and showing them, talking about their sexuality, should not be having gender, cross-dressing and transgender shows in front of these little kids. All of us are being called, well, here's a Grabian montage of the way we are being talked about in the press. And this is not just the left-wing press. This is the press in general. Cut 3.
This means war. That is where we are. We are at war with these people. These folks are evil.
There is an ultra-right MAGA contingent in this country that wants to overthrow the U.S. government.
It is a danger to our democracy. It is a danger to our way of life.
The MAGA movement is a threat.
The extremists that we're dealing with every single day, we've got to kill and confront that movement.
Clearly, this is a literally call to arms.
Obviously, Republicans, I think, are the biggest threat to democracy. We don't separate right-wing extremists and Republican Party anymore.
I see this as a party, a MAGA party that no longer is confident that they can win elections with votes. And so now they're seeking to enact their political will through violence.
This is literally what conservative white folks do when they don't get their way. They turn violent.
Today's GOP is no longer a political movement. It is a fascist movement.
So we're going to talk to Megan Basham about some of the FBI's actions and who is the fascist here. And we're going to speak to Emily Finley about why democracy is threatened by people voting, why these people keep saying why that democracy is threatened by people voting. She has a really, really interesting take on this. But this is not just rhetoric. This is not just rhetoric. In North Dakota, a man named Shannon Brandt, 41 years old, got into an argument with an 18-year-old boy, Kaylor Ellingson, at some kind of street fair. And Brandt decided that Ellingson was part of what he called an extremist Republican group, got in his car and ran the boy down with his car and killed him under the influence of alcohol, apparently. Now, I want you to remember when we're talking about this, he ran this boy down and killed him. This is an 18-year-old boy. I want you to remember Charlottesville in 2017. A right-winger ran his car into a left-wing protest and killed one person and injured many people, went to prison for life, as he well deserved. And there followed the great canard that Trump said there were good people on both sides when he was talking about other people who were discussing whether a statue should be legally taken down or not. He was not talking about these people. And that became a canard that Joe Biden still spreads that lie. This guy Brandt, who ran this boy down, was released on $50,000 on bail, right? And so, of course, the media was outraged. No, the media was not outraged. According to Newsbusters, MRC Newsbusters, since September 18th, the morning and evening shows on the networks as well as MSNBC have been silent on this act of political violence. CNN covered it briefly on Friday's New Day for 1 minute and 45 seconds. And according to a search of CNN.com, the online version of the liberal cable network allowed just one story. This is real violence being caused by real rhetoric, or at least let's just say it's not being helped by real rhetoric, and silenced, erased. This boy wasn't just killed, he was erased by the press, right? This is how the left regards the ideas of God, country, and family. Because let's face it, that's what we're talking about: freedom. We're talking about we want to be free. We want to worship our God. We want to follow our morals. We want to teach our children what we believe, not what some, the clerisy believe. We want to have a country that's not governed by the UN, that's not governed by international, panels and people who don't get elected like the EU or just installed. We want our family to be our family. We want our identities as the new prime minister or presumed prime minister of Italy is saying. Now, words like God, country, and family, they can be used to disguise evil things. Any words like hope and change can be used to describe evil things. But there's just no denying that the people who are against God and against the nation and against family are the people who locked us down for 2 years to keep us from catching cold and told us we were all going to die. These are the people who want to butcher our children, who think it's absolutely fine if a 16-year-old says she thinks she's a boy to cut her breasts off, her healthy breasts. I mean, these are the people who perform drag shows for these little children and pipe illegals into the country. Incredibly lawless. That's a totally lawless thing to do. These are the people who want us to panic about the climate. Because they got us into this energy situation in the first place, which is getting these people elected. So what's so terrible? If we're really talking about the freedom to worship God, which is in our Constitution, if we're really talking about our love of family, which is a standard of human life and certainly free life, if we're really talking about love of country, where all these systems, these freedoms are preserved, why are we so afraid of this? So I know this guy named John Fonte. He is with the Hudson Institute. And he's a brilliant guy, and he knows more about political movements and their history than anyone I have ever met in my entire life. I mean, it is just remarkable. You can name any person that you know. I was listening to this guy or read a book by this guy, and he knows exactly the strains of where he is in the history of political movements. So I asked him, is this woman in Italy, is she a fascist? And he said, no, what she did was she took over a party, which does have its roots in fascism, because it's easier to take a party over and maintain the party than it is to start a new party. And then they banished all the bad guys, and now they are just a conservative party. Now, the other thing about John Fonte, he's with the Hudson Institute, I think I mentioned that, is that he's kind of a visionary. And you may not have heard of him. And the reason, in fact, a colleague of his at the Hudson Institute just said, a lot of people have heard of Francis Fukuyama, who wrote the book, The End of History. But not as many people have heard about John Fonte. And I said this was my pal Mike Duran, I said to him, yeah, that is the way it works. If you're wrong, you become famous. If you're right, nobody wants to know. That's the Cassandra syndrome. So while Francis Fukuyama was writing his book about the end of history, John Fonte at the Hudson Institute he also wrote a book called Sovereignty or Submission: Will Americans Rule Themselves or Be Ruled by Others? And he said Fukuyama is wrong. Fukuyama's thesis was that the Cold War, with the Cold War coming to an end, the argument over governance has ended. That's what he meant by the end of history. It wasn't that history was going to end. It was that certain ideas were now proved, that liberal democracy and free capitalist markets are the most advantageous systems. The struggle is over. We all agree this is the way it's going to go. But in John's book, in Fonte's book, he said Fukuyama was wrong. There is a new anti-democratic force rising, the force for global governance. And he was among the first people to foresee that this is an anti-democratic force. Here he is in a recent video he sent me discussing this at the Hudson Institute, what it is about global governance that makes it a force against democracy.
It's really post-liberal, but from a left point of view than from a right. And it's post-democratic in the sense that decision-making is transferred from the parliaments or congresses of democratic nation states to transnational or global institutions, to the European Union, the European Commission, or the International Criminal Court, or the World Trade Organization. So in a sense, it's post-democratic. It's post-national. That is, the nation state is now supposed to take a sort of a subordinate role to these global institutions, and that means post-American. It means post-Zionist, and so on. And it's even post-Western, because Western leaders no longer talk about the West, but sort of a global civilization, and they've sort of moved beyond it. By post, I mean, of course, moving beyond.
So these ideas that we have, these ideas of freedom, these ideas that the individual matters, that God should be worshipped in the way that you see fit, that your children and your family is sacred, these don't just drop out of the air. They may be part of nature, but they are enshrined in places by people. They're enshrined by cultures. And in our culture, that culture is protected by law, by written law in the Constitution. And it's that they have to pry loose. When they hear God, country, family, nation, they are hearing fascism, because they're hearing that their governance, that global governance, that idea of global peace where we're all going to come together, kumbaya, is going to be destroyed. I mean, it's an idea that gives them a sense of virtue. It gives them a sense of idealism. It gives them a sense of hope. It's the grand project that they're working on, and they don't understand why people are saying no. If you were wise enough to understand how great that was, you want to like and subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to the Andrew Klavan Podcast.